This is an inspiration podcast, part of a series of collected inspiring stories by young and adult carers who have progressed into higher or further education or into careers of their choice despite the challenges and adversity presented to them as carers. The project was funded by Reaching Wider and hosted by Credu, a charity connecting and supporting carers in Mid, West and North Wales. We hope it inspires you.
So in terms of kind of my caring when I was younger, the main focal point and the main thing I personally saw as a carer when I was younger was the caring for my dad. There's a lot of physical caring. He was stuck in bed for maybe the best part of 12 to 15 years with what was eventually kind of diagnosed as a herniated disc. And that meant a lot of kind of physical work, kind of helping get to the toilet, bathing, showering and things like that. And it's something which caused a lot of pain in his legs and things like that. So actually being mobile, being able to go and do things was very, very difficult. Sitting for prolonged periods of time. He was effectively bedridden for much of this time. And I'd say that was something which encompassed probably a lot of my early years of caring. Became a lot more psychological for my dad, in that he'd been in this state for so long, and it very much become mental. He developed problems with addiction, depression, several attempts at taking his own life, which was really quite unfortunate. Thankfully, he kind of got through it all, which I'm very thankful for. But I very much kind of saw that actually it wasn't just my dad I was caring for, it was my mum as well. Mum was very much someone who kind of put herself first, put her family first even, and she, I guess, wanted to do the best for her children because she felt as though she wasn't providing for us. However, that led her down quite an unfortunate path of troubles with alcohol, troubles with money and things like that. And I think that is something that has unfortunately carried through up until this day. I think at the time that wasn't something I saw as a thing. I think I just saw it as, oh, my mum's rubbing up against people. I knew that she was borrowing money and things like that, but I never knew to what extent. And because of that, another thing that maybe I didn't see in my youth as kind of a bit of naivety was that I had a paper and I've been working since I was 13. And that money quite frequently got funneled to her, to get us meals for the week. So in terms of kind of, I guess, looking back at it, that was a very, very prominent part of my caring, but something maybe I didn't contextualize at the time. And yeah, that's sort of something, I guess, the financial problems have maybe kind of alleviated in over the past maybe 5 or 6 years. But certainly emotional support from my mother's side is something which is still quite prominent, and which unfortunately is something I don't think she realizes, as well as kind of her troubles with addiction, with alcohol and things like that. And that is something which is still an ongoing battle, but it's not one which is easily fought. So yeah, it's something which is requiring kind of a lot of patience and time. And I guess I'm quite thankful for kind of having gone through what I did with both my parents when I was younger, because I think actually having both of them kind of have their respective issues have kind of, I guess, alleviated some of the stresses dealing with, I guess, the more social issues nowadays rather than the more physical issues that I kind of grew up with when I was younger. One thing which I've had in my mind since I was maybe in my GCSEs was that I think unlike many other people, I think I had a very clear path of where I wanted to go, not necessarily to the finer details or the finer subject areas, but certainly I had the broad scope. I wanted to go into academia. I wanted to do my biochemistry degree, and I guess I needed to do that for myself. I think to get and follow the career path that I wanted to do. So I think when it came time to go to university, I think it was quite a tumultuous time at home. I think both of my parents. My dad was kind of towards the tail end of, I guess, the physical issues he was having. It was starting to become more mental, and I think at that point that also caused a lot of conflict in the household, which I know that both of my brothers had to deal with once I'd gone. But it was very much a driver for me to go to university and make that transition. Because at the end of the day, I think it was very important for me to recognise that if I stayed there to carry on helping in the capacity that I was, there is a very good chance, in deferring, in not going in, putting it off for 1, 2, 3 years, that there's a very good chance I could have stagnated and not ended up going. Taking that step away from the family environment, it was a lot of personal growth, and I think going to university was, I guess, one of the best things that happened to me, because it allowed me to, I guess, recontextualize sort of my responsibilities in life. I think for several years, it was very much like, oh, I've got to think about, what I'm doing for, how am I kind of providing for others, putting others' needs before my own. Whereas this step kind of really made me the sole focus, and actually, what can I do? What do I want to achieve? And I think on the whole, kind of caring in university, I'm quite thankful it worked out. I think throughout my academic career, I stayed very focused and driven and hardworking, and I poured myself into my work, and it kind of came to show for it kind of coming out, 2 to 3 years later, kind of with this degree. But kind of having that, I guess, caring responsibility during university was still something which was quite present, particularly in the financial aspect. I think having me not at home certainly took its toll on my mother's side, because I think obviously with any parent, your child kind of leaving home for the first time is always an emotional time. But actually them leaving, and I think my mother certainly felt as though she almost been abandoned, I think, because I'd taken such a prominent role in helping care for, I guess, my father in her eyes, and I guess I was also a very strong support for her, and also to a degree for both my younger brothers, despite them both being incredibly headstrong people. Now they're in adulthood. In going to university, the caring role took a more financial strain on me, because when you're a student, if you're lucky enough, you get your student loan, and you use that to fund your day-to-day living. Any irresponsible student would whittle away a good part of their student loan, during the first semester going out partying, which is a great experience, and I highly recommend going out and making the most of the socializing aspect. But I think for me, I was very aware that the financial issues at home weren't going to dissipate or alleviate anytime soon. I think, if anything, me having access to government money, which wasn't effectively free because I've got the student loan to pay back, was something which maybe I got taken advantage of. I think a significant part of my student loan was going to home to help out there, and it was very much £20 here, £20 there. But actually, as you tot it up, it equated to hundreds of pounds. I think that was quite a stressor during university, having that financial burden at home as well. And I think during that time, I very much kind of tried to take it in my stride, because I didn't want a financial burden to stop me from achieving what I wanted to do. So I think maybe I lived slightly more frugally than other students because of the situation. But I also tried to put it in the context of, this isn't going to be something that's forever. I'm going to get through this degree. I'm going to work as hard as I can so I can come out the other side and be somewhat successful. And somehow I did it. I think my first year, financially I was pretty happy, but it kind of went downhill as the years went on. And I certainly, I guess, in my final year, really kind of put my time to that work to make sure that kind of coming out of that kind of final year, I was in a position to, I guess, look at making kind of some life choices and changes in my life, which, were for the good, and not necessarily get stuck in, I guess, what some may see as a toxic relationship with money and my family. I certainly sound like I'm talking quite negatively about my family, but I think unfortunately caring is one of those things where you have to try and not say have to, but you have to, I guess, be aware of, I guess, what support networks you have and use them and utilize them. I think that was a very invaluable thing at university. I built a good cohort of friends, a good cohort of colleagues. There were social support services and everything that provided for the uni. Mental health services maybe weren't as good as they are now, weren't as prominent as they are now. Using my friends for support and kind of having people to talk to, I think that was really, really valuable, and kind of acknowledging that, I can't let my role as a carer stop me from doing kind of what I want to do. Particularly, my undergraduate degree was very much somewhere where I felt quite conflicted, and I think looking back at it, I'm still very proud that I've done what I've done, particularly given the challenges that I faced. What could I have done differently, and kind of what boundaries could I have drawn as a carer, particularly in that social and financial aspect, rather than the more hands-on approach I had, and kind of whether that is something I could have handled better. I felt pressure to go on and go, right, I'm going to do my undergraduate, I'm going to do my master's, I'm going to do my PhD, and I'm going to be, this amazing human in the next kind of 5 years with all these titles to my name, which I think, particularly when I was at school, there's a big pressure to kind of just keep going and do as much as you can. But upon completing my degree, I had applied for a master's course, but funding had fallen through. And while at the time I looked at that as an absolute travesty, and that, what am I going to do? I was really thankful for it, because actually that allowed me to take this step, I guess, not necessarily further away from my caring or further away from academia, but certainly in a step which allowed me to grow and develop as a person. I think, my focus had been for the past 3 years during academia, and back in school, doing my GCSEs all the way back in 2010, was my focuses were caring and my grades, and I was measuring my success against letters and numbers, which although there is that kind of pressure with universities, and academia, you need to get the grades and things, it's not the be all and end all. It's kind of you need to kind of take that time to learn who you are and where your limits are. So post university, I went on and actually just got a job in a bar, this lovely bar called the Glengower in Aberystwyth. It's on the seafront. I learned that my family situation at home wasn't best. I think I truly kind of understood its context in the wider scheme of things. So from there, and spending that time kind of, I guess, learning useful life skills, dealing with how to deal with different kinds of people, how to, I guess, part manage a business, because I got up to kind of a supervisor, assistant manager level, how to learn some life skills, kind of deal with people. That year was really important to me. I think I personally recommend anyone kind of going into academia straight from school, just taking that kind of moment to think, do I really want to go from one thing to another? Just taking a year out and kind of learning who you are. And actually, from that year, I ended up doing something I didn't think I'd do. I kind of met Lily, my partner, and we both kind of made a choice. Her academic year had come to the end. It's like, what do we do now? We had to make the difficult choice of going back to my parents, which would have been fine, but we live in a very rural area. There's not much in terms of opportunities there. So we made the choice of moving down to Stroud and moving into her parents, and they were really, really gracious about it. They let me move into their home and kind of use this time to kind of, for both of us to kind of figure out what we wanted to do next. It was a very comfortable environment. They didn't feel pressured to, well, we didn't feel pressured to kind of rush out and find a job. But I think having worked for 12 months and kind of, I guess, also use that time to kind of recover somewhat financially from the troubles that I was in, I went on to look for work, and I think I was very lucky in that I found a general manager's position at a brand new business opening up. I was solely responsible. I was the sole worker there because it was only a micro pub, and kind of through my hard work and dedication and kind of my building rapport with suppliers and our clientele and things like that, I managed to take this fledgling business and turn it to a profitable business within space of about 12 months. Unfortunately, although it was a tumultuous time in university, it kind of the relationship further degraded between my parents. I think at that point my father had managed to kind of get out of the mental kind of state he was in, and he kind of got to the point where he was up and moving and things like that. So he was trying to find work and get back into work. However, I guess this is the kind of time in my life where the caring kind of really took a different shape, because I think at this point my father was feeling very frustrated. He lost out on best part of 12 years of his life. He'd missed out on his children growing up. He'd missed out on having that opportunity to be a father figure, to do fatherly things. So he was really trying to kind of get back out into the world and do things, and he spent a lot of time trying to find work. He tried a few things, didn't work out. But eventually himself found a role in caring. My mother had reached a point with her problems with addiction and things like that, in that she wasn't able to get herself out of the rut, and she wasn't willing to make that change. What someone who you care for is unwilling to kind of cooperate, or is unable to cooperate and enact change, is incredibly tough, because the only thing you can do is sit there and be a support. I guess better manage the negativity and the environment at home, because although caring isn't a negative experience, it's a very rewarding experience. You sometimes having that separation and actually not being in the environment is very, very important, because it allows you to recontextualize and allows you to kind of better help and be better equipped with some of your, I guess, more social responsibilities and the social aspects of caring, rather than the physical aspects. So I think that was something which is very, very helpful for me. Yes. So I think in terms of putting in boundaries at that point in my life, I think it is very clear that I'd made a transition to a different point in my life where I was looking to take the next steps. And I think at that point I had to have, it wasn't a case of one single hard conversation with my family, but it was very much many smaller ones over several weeks, in that, I can't constantly be a source of income. I kind of set the boundaries, and that, I'm happy to help out slightly financially, just because I knew that it wasn't going to be an immediate fix overnight. However, I couldn't be being relied upon the way I was beforehand. And I think that was a very tough transition, because it meant that with my dad getting back into work, he felt a responsibility to kind of work more and work harder, which obviously after being effectively bedridden for 12 years or so is going to be tough on the body. I think then that also left my mum questioning her purpose. And because at the end of the day, I think unfortunately she was left in a position where she was at home, not sort of doing anything all the day, sitting watching TV, unfortunately, dealing with her alcohol addiction and things like that. I started a master's at the University of Birmingham, looking at cancer research, and it was a research master's. And I think one big delineation for research masters is it's very self-driven. I think over my period away from academia, I developed quite a strong sense of autonomy, in that I knew who I was, I knew what I wanted out of life, and I felt as though I finally had that direction, as well as the resources to get me there. And then after that, it was a 9-month project, which I was entirely responsible for my own work. I was researching this really, really cool system of little, I guess, implants which could get inserted into the brain after people had an operation, and to just to treat any residual cancer that is there, which, although may sound quite horrific and traumatic to others, it's something which really fascinated me. We bought this house and we spent a good solid month and a half, 2 months, really spending our time and focusing on that. But also, I guess for me, I was very much of the opinion that actually nothing has to be done, and actually I think that's something I brought through from all of this with my caring. And actually, patience has been so important in terms of seeing what prospects there were for further education up here, kind of what projects were going on. Because I think one thing that isn't communicated very well is that PhDs and things like that aren't something which necessarily have to be posted on websites, on forums, and find a PhD. It doesn't have to be listed. If you reach out and engage with people and just take that kind of step, although it's terrifying, emailing someone you've never met, they've never heard of you, and being like, hey, what's going on? Have you got any cool opportunities coming up? 9 times out of 10, I found they're so pleased to hear from you, and they're so pleased you've reached out. I spoke to my this doctor, and she said, "Hey, I'm a new PI. I need to start at the university. I've come from another university in Glasgow, and I'm looking for my first PhD student." Which point where I am now starting a fully funded PhD this September 2021, and it's something which I guess for a long time I knew I wanted to do, but I didn't know when I was going to get there, how I was going to get there, what challenges I was going to face in terms of achieving that goal. I feel as though caring made me a very, very strong person. I think, particularly when you're younger, you've got the pressures of the school social dynamic, kind of I guess what grades you've got to get in school, you kind of what people see as successful, and what kind of challenges you face in school. I very much felt as though, what, I don't see a life outside of caring. I don't see a life where caring isn't going to be at the forefront of my mind. I've come such a long way, and I think I've grown a lot as a person. I've managed to develop a healthy boundary with my family, with my parents. And although I still somewhat have a role in caring as, I guess, in a social manner, it's something which you can work. I guess I'm looking back, it's something, I guess, that everyone should kind of be aware of, that you can work on in terms of what opportunities life gives you, and not to take any opportunities you're given, for granted. And just, I think it certainly led me to a position where I've jumped at opportunities rather than maybe 10 years ago I would have shied away from them and be like, oh no, it's fine, I can't do that. It's not something which I don't think I'll be able to continue. I don't think it's worthwhile. It's certainly kind of made me realize that not to let anything in life pass me by, which is really nice.
This is an inspiration podcast, part of a series of collected inspiring stories by young and adult carers who have progressed into higher or further education or into careers of their choice despite the challenges and adversity presented to them as carers. The project was funded by reaching wider